So, by the way, before we leave it, just so you'll remember, after they ran those Greeks out of there, ran them back up to Syria where they belong, then they went in and cleansed the temple. And the Jews today have a feast commemorating that event. What's that called? It's Hanukkah. It goes by 3 names. Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights, and the eating part of it. You know, you have to eat to have a good time. It's called the Feast of Dedication. They rededicate, they cleanse the temple and rededicate it. So that all goes together. So at Christmas time, when we're having Christmas, and you see the Jews lighting the menorah, they're celebrating the time when the Jews ran the Greeks out of town. Okay?
What was the timeline of,
This is 175 BC right here when they ran that. And Antiochus, let's see, he came out at 187. And by the way, you know what happened to this guy? He died mysteriously. He got really sick right at the end of this revolt, and he died. And we're not sure why. Did the Lord take him? Or did one of his own people say, he's caused nothing but trouble, and they poisoned him? There's a real kind of intrigue and mystery around his death and what happened to Antiochus. But by the way, I didn't mention this last week. Why is this name important, Antiochus, to Christians? Where were Christians first called Christians? In Antioch, in Syria. And so after this dynasty, the town of Antioch was named, and Christians were first called Christians in Antioch. Very important. So that's where that ties in. Now look, if you would, at this last part of chapter 8. Now we started on 15 last week, and we were talking about the interpretation of the dream. And I want to look at verse 21 and following. Then we're going to go to the book of Revelation for just a moment. This is Romans chapter 8 and verse 21. What did I say? Daniel fell out of the... I fell out of the... I'm reading a book entitled... it's a bestseller entitled... what's the name? Proof of Heaven. And it's bestseller. It's got a doctor who had a bacterial case of meningitis. He was clinically dead for 7 days. And it's a very interesting book. I'm not him, so I'm not recommending it to you. I'm just recalling from the book that when he came out of the coma, he couldn't remember a lot of things for about 2 months. That's where I am at. So here we are, the goat, verse 21 in Daniel. I'm sorry. And the shaggy goat represents the kingdom of Greece. The large horn that is between his eyes is the first king. And the broken horn and the 4 horns that arose in its place represent the 4 kingdoms which will arise from his nation, although not with his power. And now here's where we come to Antiochus and to Antichrist. And in the latter period of their rule, when the transgressors have run their course, a king will arise. Now it says the transgressors. This is the 8-king lineage in the Seleucid dynasty. And when it says the transgressors have run their course, it's talking about the end of their reign. A king will arise. Who is this king? Antiochus Epiphanes. Insolent and skilled in intrigue, and his power will be mighty, but not by his own power. What is this trying to say? Trying to say that it is Satan who will empower him. Okay, now, we're looking in this description not only at Antiochus Epiphanes, but we're looking at a description of Antichrist who is to come. We're going to go over to 13 in Revelation and talk about it in just a minute. And he will destroy to an extraordinary degree, and prosper and perform his will. He will destroy mighty men and the holy people. He will destroy the holy people. And through his shrewdness, he will cause deceit to succeed by his influence. And he will magnify himself in heart, and he will destroy many while they are at ease. He will even oppose the prince of princes, but he will be broken without human agency. Now, as we come toward the end of this prophecy, it's going to begin to allude to and shade to the prophecy about Antichrist. Because although, and I mentioned, Antiochus died a mysterious death, the Jews celebrated the fact that God dealt with that guy. They didn't have to kill him in battle. God took his life. Well, in a greater sense, we're going to see it now, Antichrist is going to be destroyed by the coming of Christ himself. He will oppose the Prince of Princes. Who is the Prince of Princes? That's a prophecy about Jesus who is to come. Verse 26, and the vision of the evenings and mornings, which has been told, is true. But keep the vision secret, for it pertains to many days in the future. Now in verse 26, the angel is speaking to Daniel and saying, all of what I've told you is true, but I want you to seal this up, for it pertains to many days in the future. Now, we're talking from the time Daniel received this prophecy until Antiochus Epiphanes. The fulfillment of that would be about 200 years, a little less than 200. But it is reaching out into the future, way out into the future, speaking about the coming of Antichrist. Seal it up. And it's going to say at the end of this book, seal up this prophecy for the end time. And then look at verse 27. Then I, Daniel, was exhausted and sick for days. Then I got up again and carried on the king's business, but I was astounded at the vision, and there was none to explain it. What Daniel meant was, you showed me all of this stuff, and it came to him graphically. It was like a video playing out in his mind. He was seeing the future because God's sovereign over time, and all of this was showed to him about what was going to happen to his people. And when he received it all, he was exhausted, he was emotionally spent, he fell on the floor, and he was sick about what he knew. And he still said, I even had more questions than I had answers. And that's where he was. But he knew terrible times were in the future. Now let me ask you to turn to Revelation 13. And in the book of Daniel, where we've been reading, there in the margin from verses 23 to 26, you should write Revelation 13 somewhere. Because this passage speaks of something that is still in our future.
Give us the reference again.
This is right, if you would, in the margin in Daniel chapter 8, somewhere beside verse 25 and 26. Just write, see Revelation 13. See Revelation 13. And so now we're going to go to Revelation 13 and talk about that. And there are three great important chapters in the book of Revelation if you want to talk about being on the victory side. You've got to get Revelation 13, 16, and 19. 13, 16, and 19. 3 chapters each time. And it's going to tell about the Antichrist, about the Battle of Armageddon, Christ's return and the Antichrist, and the old devil being thrown into the bottomless pit. So let's go to Revelation 13. Now, we've been talking about Antiochus Epiphanes and how the prophecy that Daniel saw and was given to him about Antiochus Epiphanes also applies in a larger, ultimate fashion to the Antichrist who is to come, because they have very, very strong similarities. So let's read about the Antichrist. Revelation 13. And he stood on the sand of the seashore. And I saw, this is an angel, and I saw a beast coming up out of the sea. Now, circle the word beast there, because it's not going to be an animal, it's going to be a man. This is another name for Antichrist. The beast. And I saw a beast coming up out of the sea. Now, before we get going very much further, let me tell you that the word sea in prophecy, like the ocean, coming up out of the ocean, sea represents the population of people on the earth. This is from Isaiah. Isaiah said that the peoples of the earth are like the great sea. And John is using that here, but it is being given to him by the angel to see a beast coming up out of the sea. This is apocalyptic language. And there are some markers and some key words. Sea always represents the people of the earth. And beast represents a bad dude. I was teaching Sunday schools to some in Fort Worth one time when I was going to seminary. I had a group of kids that we gathered from the neighborhood in bus ministry, and we were reading Bible passages. We were having Sunday school one morning, and I was reading about the Gerasene demoniac. We're reading through the book of Mark, and it talked about the description of this guy, that he howled like a wolf and he ran through the tombs at night and he broke chains. They tried to chain him, but he had such strength he could break the chains, and the description went on and nobody could, and he came and fell at Jesus' feet. I said, what do you think about this guy? One guy, he never heard this story. He was hearing it for the first time. He said, that is one rude dude. And I said, he is a rude dude. Well, this is the king of rude dudes in chapter 13. He had 10 horns and 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 diadems, and on his head were blasphemous names. I'm going to talk to you about the 10 horns later, but they represent authority in a revived empire, Roman Empire. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth was like the mouth of a lion. Now, remember, those animals represent Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. But this guy is so powerful, he embodies the strength of all of those. In other words, it's saying that this last kingdom is going to be the most formidable, the most powerful, and it'll span the whole earth. And his mouth was like the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and his throne and his great authority. Now let me stop there and ask you, who is the dragon? Satan.
Satan.
Who is going to give Antichrist his power?
Satan.
Who gave Antiochus his power? Satan.
Satan.
Who gave Hitler his power?
Satan.
Who is going to give the Antichrist who is to come? Well, and we can say, who gives power to any evil man? In a sense, Satan.
Satan.
But in Antichrist, it's going to be a direct link. Gave him his power and his throne and his great authority. And I saw one of the heads as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed. Now, people always ask, and I wanted to read this tonight, how are you going to know who the Antichrist